So our last topic before we open up to questions is really around competition. So how do you see the EU's role in regards to competition with Asia and the US? Does the EU just keep regulating while China is producing and the US invests? Or, you are in a tech company, so you can also choose the angle if you wish. Do you think that innovation will suffer if we regulate new technologies like AI? Yes? Stine?
I want to say something from my experience in businesses for some years now. We were very naive towards what was going on in China. I just have to say it to you, from many, many areas of experience. We were very naive. And that, of course, has to stop. So the fact that we now are supplying with, is it 91% of all the solar panels in our part of the world is from China is, of course, hopeless. And what I'm going to say now is not something that my party thinks is great, but it is obviously necessary. Because the way China is acting is not like a business that we know. They are sending money with every single product. Look at Temu, the online platform. They are sending 100 747 planes every week to the German market alone. And they have about 15%. Every time they lose 15%. So they're not acting as a business. They're acting differently. You look at Huawei, how they acted. So we have to think about this differently. The solution, unfortunately, will have to be some kind of toll. And look what Biden did. He said 100%. I'm not sure that's going to be good for Europe to say something like that. But there needs to come out some kind of solution with tolls. And then the other way around, matching aid. Unfortunately, it's not going to be great the next years because it's never great really for innovation and stuff like that. But it's just to not be overwhelmed before any kind of deliberate aggressiveness comes sitting on the whole global trade, and that we cannot allow.
Yes.
And that's China I'm talking about, unfortunately.
Thank you, Henrik. And do you also, there's the new border carbon tax on imports as well?
Yeah, okay. The carbon border adjustment mechanism, which we support. So you can't lower your carbon footprint and export to Europe, and then you will be taxed.
Thank you.
So, but I agree with Stine that the West, the political West, won the Cold War, and then we lost the peace after the Cold War. And the problem now is that we have to understand that we lost the peace after the Cold War, and we lost it by committing a number of policy errors, and one of them was China, because obviously China is waging economic warfare against Europe and the West, and we have to understand that China is not a good faith actor. And the belief always was that China would be a good faith actor. The German Chancellor Merkel said that if you interact commercially with countries, they will change politically. And that was, of course, totally wrong. They would just take advantage of you. For those of you who are interested in political theory, everybody in the West thought that Francis Fukuyama was right, but it was Samuel Huntington who was right. And we should have listened to Samuel Huntington all along, because he said 30 years ago that China will never buy in on human rights, and they are really just in it for the power and for the money. So we have to correct that. But the other thing is over-regulation. I think the EU is way too over-regulated, and we have to look at regulation the way we look at costs in general, like we look at rent, because the regulation is equal to a cost from the point of view of companies. It's time and money you have to spend on compliance. And the reason you don't see smaller companies growing and you don't see innovative companies growing is that they cannot afford the regulation. So it's easy for a large company to hire an entire floor of attorneys, but to a compliance department, but a smaller company can't do that. So we have to get rid of all this regulation. We can't get rid of it, but we have to shrink it.
Sorry.
Right.
Yes. Thank you, Rasmus.
When we talk competition, I think it's really important that we in Europe also look at what field is it we want to compete in. I mean, is it going to be competing with Temu and Shein and all these Chinese companies? Is that the kind of competition we're looking into? Using slave labor, polluting the environment as they're doing. I mean, we need to create the field where we want to make the competition, and not just being followers and saying, oh, the competition right now. I mean, the growth in US is better than in EU, so we have to follow along. I'm sorry, I don't want to create the society there is in the US at the moment in the EU. I want to do something else here. But then we have to take that serious and say, okay, we need to put the right regulation in place. I actually think regulation is good for innovation because it actually pushes you as you're innovating into finding solutions. And at the same time, when we need to support that kind of thing. Right now, what we're doing in the EU is we're talking about circular economy, and at the same time, our public procurement is based solely on what's cheapest. Instead of saying the billions and billions EU member states, municipalities are spending every year should go into actually supporting the circular economy that we are talking about. No, right now we're just saying buy the cheapest possible you can, and then at the same time we're telling businesses we want you to be circular. So that's where we actually need to regulate in the right way and saying we need new laws on public procurement that actually pushes for what we want, because that's also gonna support the businesses to grow that we actually want to see grow, and not just the other ones.
Thank you. I like how there's collaboration going on. Lead on that. Okay. So last comment before we go to the Q&A. So get your questions ready, everyone.
Yeah, just one point.
Yes,
I think there's a difference between, and you need to separate the two issues. So you have one is regulation, and then you have one that is bureaucracy. And obviously there are a mix between those two, but regulation is also something that you forbid, right? So you take asbestos, you forbid it. And when you take PFAS, these products that are chemicals that are dangerous for people, we regulate that out. I mean, so for the next, I hopefully for the next few years we'll make it illegal to put PFAS in different products and get it out of the industry, because it's damaging causes cancer and all sorts of different diseases. And that is regulation that we need. And that is also regulation regarding to, for instance, our carbon tax, making it pricey to emit by burning fossil fuels in coal industry, for instance. That is regulation that we need, and we need more of that in order to force innovation through a sector. For instance, if you tax the emissions in the farming industry, obviously you will see some kind of innovation, whereas if you do not tax it enough, you will definitely not see innovation. So that is the positive side of regulation. You make rules that force companies to actually think about their processes and how they work materials differently. For instance, let me give you an example. Rockwool, they are changing from coal to gas in their furnaces when they produce, and that have a major contribution in their reduction of a carbon print, because they know that we will tax coal more. And then they have bureaucracy. So let me just, one thing. I think I agree on that with Henrik, that there have been a lot of legislation for the last few years, and it is difficult for companies to navigate in. And I think we commented on a company, me and Henrik, both of us, which was a guy, a small startup who wanted to make a drink, a beverage of sorts, and it took him 600 days to get approval from the European Union. And 600 days when you have an idea, that's just, we need to figure out a way to make that 200 days or 300 days or some kind of ceiling on approval dates, because you cannot let people stand in that situation. I think that's embarrassing, and we need to do it differently.
Yeah.
So the two different issues, I think.
Exactly. Thank you. And I know in the global trade and the maritime industry, the first movers move, and regulations will help the second movers move.